They said, don't ask him about his youthful appearance and don't say happy birthday. You might get 4 minutes with Reese Witherspoon. I left after two.
Hi and welcome to Flaawsome Talk. I'm Kjersti Flaa. I'm an entertainment reporter, journalist. I've been interviewing celebrities for way over a decade here in Hollywood. Today I have a very special treat for you guys. I have a guest, Nelson Aspen, who is a showbiz host. He is an award-winning journalist and author, and he's got many books out. Two of them are called Dancing Between Raindrops, and one is about his life in New York in the 80s, and one is about living here in Hollywood in the 90s and all his interactions with celebrities. He's going to share a lot of juicy stories here today. Yes, so I'm super excited to have him here on my show. So please welcome Nelson Aspen. Nelson, I'm so happy to see you, and thank you for joining my little show here on YouTube. And I haven't seen you in, I think, since before COVID.
We went from seeing each other. We would see each other like once a week all over the world. We were running into each other in the most glamorous destinations, and now we just settle for Zoom. But it's lovely to be reunited with you, and we've been staying in touch. So now we just get to see each other.
So, do you remember your very first junket? What you felt like? What surprised you about the whole setup and everything?
Oh, well, I've always been such a studious pupil. I want to get a gold star and an A+ on every assignment. So I was over prepared. I really did. I think probably for the first 100 junkets, I probably took it a little too seriously. And that's not to say I blew it off after that, but I certainly got more comfortable. And as you know, the publicists who orchestrate, coordinate, and run the junket machine and the publicity machine of promotion, you establish relationships with them as well. And I found that was the most important. For example, it was easy for Julie Andrews to be sweet and nice to me because I was sweet and nice with her manager. So whenever they wanted Julie Andrews to talk to anyone from Australia, it was always me. And that enabled me to have a relationship with her. So it is a business of relationship.
Have you ever been like interrupted or anything like that happen in an interview?
Oh, yeah. I remember one time Dennis Quaid didn't want to let me in the room because his publicist had Googled me. Google was new then. They had Googled me and found that I was quoted on page 6 of the New York Post. And they decided they didn't like that. Ironically, now Dennis Quaid is the darling of the New York Post. All he had to do was play Ronald Reagan, and now he's the darling of the New York Post. But more seriously, I remember the first time I went to interview Reese Witherspoon was for a film called Rendition with Jake Gyllenhaal. And she was going through an off-camera thing with Jake Gyllenhaal and the breakup of her marriage to Ryan. And in the film, she played a mother whose husband disappears. It's war related. And so I asked her a question, as a mother. I didn't think that was particularly scandalous. As the woman is a mother, the character was a mother. So I was asking her something mother related. And somewhere from the back in the dark, a voice comes, Nelson, move on to another question. And I'm thinking, what? This is Nelson. I'm the good guy. I'm not TMZ digging around for dirt. I'm a nice guy. I want to make you look good. I want to look good. I'm a happy, team player. So I tried again, and again, the voice in the background scolded me. And I hate being scolded. I'm not a 5-year-old. And I don't know. I finally gave up, and I said, "Well, thank you very much." And I got up and I left. And who would you might get 4 minutes with Reese Witherspoon. I left after 2. It was pointless. So that kind of thing does happen, but it's rare. It's very rare. More often than not. Paul Rudd is another one. I was doing one of the
Paul Rudd?
where he was playing Ant-Man or something. Yeah, and he's usually very sweet, right?
Yeah.
But it was his birthday, and that's when everybody was talking about ageless Paul Rudd. He never ages. He was getting, apparently, and I was the last journalist of the day because I didn't have a plane to catch. You go ahead of me. You go ahead of me. You go ahead of me. I didn't have anywhere to go. So they said, don't ask him about his youthful appearance and don't say happy birthday. birthday. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. Don't say happy birthday to a man on his birthday. And he's, Mr. Nice Guy. But this comes from him. I mean, yeah, it was coming from the publicist. But he must have said, I don't want to talk about my birthday anymore. And they enforced it. And I came in and he was with Jeremy Renner. They were paired together. Jeremy's not always the most lighthearted of fellows, as you probably know. And I don't know. It all went south. And I didn't say something particularly about his birthday. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but whatever it was, they were very sensitive about it. And it was very uncomfortable and awkward. And nobody says that about Paul Rudd. But it happens. They're people too. And I would point out that Reese Witherspoon and I made up for that rough start with several other interviews later where she couldn't have been sweeter. So we have to remind ourselves that celebrities have bad days too.
Yeah, for sure. I was in the same situation as you were with Jason Statham when I congratulated him on his birthday and asked how he felt about turning 50. And it was a voice from the side like, we're not talking about that. I was like, okay. Anyone can Google you.
It's like the voice of God. And it's always very condescending. It's very condescending to be spoken to that way. And Jason, you can't ask him about his clothes. He wants to be on every best dressed list. But don't you dare ask him about his clothes.
Oh, really?
And I think it's because he's short. And they're afraid that if you somehow say, stand up and show us but I'm lucky. I'm 5'7". I can make anybody look tall.
It's funny. So what did you think when you saw my Blake Lively interview? What was your reaction?
Well, my first thought was that that little pit you get in your stomach where you realize, oh gosh, I know what she's going through. And not particularly about Blake, but just as one journalist looking at another journalist, it's like, oh, that terrible feeling when you're being disrespected and condescended to. Kevin Spacey did that with me, and I'll never forget it. I don't talk down to me. Stanley Tucci did that to me before, and it's really unusual. It is not the norm. So, I mean, we're talking about it today because it is the exception and not the rule. But watching you with Blake, that was my first response. It was like, oh, you poor thing. I know how that goes. My second response was, Blake, because I've interviewed her twice. The first time was for that shark movie, where she was stranded on the rock with the shark coming at her, right? So that was the first time I ever met her. And I walked into that room and I thought I was looking at a goddess. She was the most beautiful, exquisite creature I'd ever laid eyes on. I was really, really gobsmacked. And her personality matched that beauty. She was fun, she was playful, she was great, whatever. Flash forward to the one she did with Anna Kendrick, the something.
A Simple Favor. Yeah, so, I was there too.
Yeah. Right. So I'm figuring, oh, this is going to be fun. I'd interviewed Anna before, so she's fine. But oh, Blake, she's going to be a hoot. I can't wait. And I went in and it was a beautiful room and they were paired together. And I think that may have had something to do with it. I don't know. Again, she could have been having a bad day. Maybe they didn't get along. Maybe there was a competition. Maybe it was just two egos trapped in the same room. And I thought maybe that would have had something to do with your situation as well. Maybe Blake is just better one-on-one. I don't know. But she answered every question with a question combatively. It was not pleasant. And Anna sort of did the same. Like she was like, okay, this is girl power. We're going to team up on the journalist. And whatever. I got through it. We cut it together so that I had a couple of nice moments because I don't want to make anybody look bad. But in your interview with Blake, I recognized it. This is a trait, obviously a recurring one. So, hey, now everybody, thanks to you, everybody's warned.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing these things. You said you even had like good and bad with Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan, as his star has risen, and it is really an unprecedented in how high his star has risen. And he is a multi-hyphenate. But I remember the old days when he was easygoing and, he was kind of funny looking and goofy and playful and just happy to be there. And as time went on, he got better styled. He got a better haircut. He got better light, as things. And of course, he was still charming and very good at what he did. And this was the last interview I did with him was a Zoom interview because it was during COVID. And I don't remember, was it an animated thing? It was something. I was doing my umpteenth interview with him, and my producer called me and said, his publicist wants you to submit the questions in advance. And like, look, I'm not Bob Woodward. I'm not trying to like find the next Watergate. This was to interview Ryan Reynolds in a happy thing about his happy, I think it was an animated movie. But I got miffed. I was like, well, his publicist would know how many times already I have interviewed him, and how much you can trust me. So what do you mean you want my questions in advance? Granted, the questions were probably a half a dozen questions that I'd only get to two or three, and they'd be about, what did you do to get in character for that voice? I mean, I was not setting him up for anything, but I took issue with it, and I refused. I refused to send the questions, thinking they'd say, oh, it's Nelson, we'll let him go. They came back and they said, if he doesn't submit the questions, you can't do it. So I thought, all right, well, and my producer really wanted the interview. I was willing to let it go, but I was like, all right, if you really want it. And I came up with questions I would never in a zillion years have asked. I made them rather, I don't know, provocative. I came up with some provocative questions that had nothing to do with the movie. They approved it. And once we got into the conversation, I think it was really just about him being made to feel comfortable. It was a power thing. That's what they decided. He or his publicist or his agent or his manager or Blake wanted the questions. So once I obliged, he was cool and he was relaxed. And this is a thing that a lot of early and first-time junketeers don't always realize, is that if the talent is relaxed, you will get a better interview. So let them have their 25th cup of coffee. Let them fuss around or primp or whatever. If they're comfortable, you'll get a better interview. So that was the case with Ryan. But I was a little disappointed. No one on the planet is better at the junket situation than Hugh Jackman. I've interviewed him 1,000 times. We have mutual friends, so we see each other socially. We've sung together at weddings.
Oh, you have?
He's the best. Oh yeah. Hugh is the best. But I remember several junkets. He had a coffee company called Laughing Man.
Yeah.
It was to benefit, I think, Ethiopian coffees, right? So he would arrange to have a barista show up at the junket and wisely put the barista in the waiting room with the journalists, so that and he'd stop in and he'd go, hey, everybody, you enjoying your coffee? And you'd be like, oh, Hugh Jackman cares about me. He wants me to have a cup of coffee. But it was very clever PR, because it makes him look great. It makes us love him more. And it makes the whole experience more fun for everybody. I wish more celebrities could be like Hugh.
Oh, me too. He's definitely one of my top favorites of all times. Do you have other favorite people that you feel like are above everyone else when it comes to being nice and open and give good interviews?
Yeah, and people ask all the time, who are your favorites? Who are your favorites? And it might be a bit of a cliche, but I tend to gravitate toward the older stars.
Me too.
The late great Betty White, Julie Andrews, Clint Eastwood. I remember Christopher Plummer so fondly. Any of the older stars. Meryl Streep now qualifies as an older star, but because they're comfortable in their own skins, they're not as worried about how they look or what they're going to say, or they're not so self-aware that it sacrifices the quality of an interview. You sit down with Meryl Streep and you say anything, and she's not going to be thrown. She'll tell you a story that she may not have told any other journalists. And that's what you want. That's what we all want. We want something that's unique and bespoke to our brief little conversation. And the older and more comfortable the stars are, the more likely they are to give you that. Robert De Niro is an exception. He's not as comfortable in his own skin as others. I remember going in to do an interview with Robert De Niro, and they had warned me he won't make eye contact with you. And I'm like, okay, well, fine. And it wasn't just that he didn't make eye contact. As you know, when you're in the junket situation, there's one camera on you and a second camera on the celebrity. Well, the camera that was on me was off to a weird angle I'd never seen before, so that Robert De Niro never had to look me in the face. He looked off camera down, down at this other thing. But when we cut it together, it looked as if he were looking at me. They went to so much trouble to avoid him having to look at the journalist that they repositioned the camera, which I thought was bizarre.
Yes. Wow, how clever. You noticed all these little things. I mean, I've interviewed him many times, and every time he's like, the thing is with him, I feel like he knows he's so awkward or like uncomfortable in these situations. I remember I asked him once about his Oscar and what he felt like on stage, and he was like, it was fun. And he was like, are you not happy with that answer? And I'm like, no, maybe you can say a little bit more about it, and he's like, okay. And you see that he doesn't have the vocabulary to talk a lot in these situations. And I feel like sorry for him because he tries, but he's just not very good at it.
Some just don't like it. Kevin Spacey has notoriously been, I mentioned him previously, but he's notoriously, not that he's doing many junkets these days, but notoriously a grumpy interview subject. And I think it's because he doesn't enjoy it. Well, guess what? If it's not your cup of tea, get it written into the contract that you don't do the press. I don't know, Kevin, maybe take $1 million less and skip the junkets. I don't know what the answer is, but if you're going to do it, suck it up. You're an actor. Fake it.
Yes. Thank you so much. That's what I've been trying to say so many times here on my channel when people are like, oh, they're just actors and poor people. You should just ask about the movie and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, as you're saying, they're actors. And I think, also, if you don't want to talk about something, you can say it in a polite and nice way and just move on instead of making a big deal about it or be rude to the reporter. Like, we're there to do a job. They're there to do a job. So I think, as you said, the older they are, the nicer and more open. And also, I think sometimes the bigger the star, the nicer and better. Yeah, like Tom Cruise does. Have you ever interviewed him?
He is a master. He is a master at this. And when Tom Cruise is looking at you, he's looking at you. You are putty in his hand because he fixes you with those eyes and smile, and you're in the palm of his hand, and you're like, what would you like to ask me, Tom? Ask me anything, Tom. He's amazing. And working a red carpet, he's a master at that as well, because he shows up never late, but never early. And his gift, which I think is so clever, and it's a good note for any celebrities who don't want to talk to journalists on a red carpet. Talk to the fans. He spends all his time posing for selfies and interacting with the very enthusiastic fans that he doesn't have time to talk to the journalists. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I gotta go. And he rushes up the red carpet. And it's a brilliant way to avoid the press.
I never even thought about that. You have thought about so many things that I'm like, oh, I'm having these aha moments now.
Now that I'm not on the air anymore, I can do media trading and it's like things to watch for. And especially so much of what I did was live on the air. So there's a big difference between working a red carpet and just trying to get sound bites and working a red carpet when you're live on the air and desperate to get somebody to come to you and to paint the picture. And I don't know, I'd say the red carpets are red because of all the blood spilled by journalists. It's a war zone.
It's like, yeah, as you say, you can go there, you have a team with you and everything, and you stand for hours and hours and wait, and then they just pass you. And you're like, okay, let's go home. We didn't get anything.
Buster for whatever. I'm very lucky that I have a very loud voice and I may be short in size, but when I need to get a celebrity over to me, I can usually make so much noise that they at least look in my direction.
Do you do then scream their names? Or get over here?
I scream until I am the next day. I can never speak. I never plan to speak the day after a red carpet. But you know, little tricks like for working for an Australian outlet. If I wanted to get an Australian star, like if I knew Nicole Kidman was going to be there, and Rose Byrne, or Chris Hemsworth, or Hugh Jackman, or whatever, you know, chances are they know me. They would recognize me from all those decades on Australian television. So if I can just get them to look at me, some journalists carry little flags of their country. I don't really need to wave a flag, but I will call out their name or say something that will, you know, we have the same personal trainer, or I know you're a personal chef. I'll scream a name, something that will get them to do a double take. But that's the fun of being a journalist in a very competitive game. What makes you unique? Of course, we all have to be ourselves because nobody wants to see you fake it. But be yourself, but find methods to make your reporting unique.
Now we have to talk about your book. You've written already like 3 books,
Yeah,
right?
I've written, I'm up to eight, but I'm up to eight in
8.
total with two more coming in 2025. But when I left the morning show, so many people had asked me, won't you write an autobiography? You have so many stories to tell. You've had such a fascinating life. And I thought, well, it's been so much fun that I don't remember everything with perfect clarity. And if you're going to write, especially as a journalist, if you're going to write an autobiography, you must be accurate. I thought that sounds like a pain in the ass. I don't want to be that accurate. So what I did is I fictionalized it in a very Jackie Collins kind of salacious way. And the first book, Dancing Between the Raindrops, is based on my life in 1980s New York City, the 10 years that I spent here from 1980 to 90. You know, it's 99% true. I changed a few names. I had to shuffle around some sequence things to make it work with my timing. It was very well received, so much so that I am now out with the sequel, Dancing Between the Raindrops, The Hollywood Years. And The
Oh,
Hollywood Years, it's twice as long and twice as filthy because it's the 22 years that I spent in Los Angeles with my sort of junket career. And I was in Los Angeles from 1990 to 2020 to 2012. And so I was dealing with the O.J. Simpson double murder case. I was actually very intimately involved with that whole story. And the beginnings of my junket career, interestingly, it was the death of Michael Jackson that changed my career. I was live on the air reporting about Farrah Fawcett's death when I got the news in my ear, stop talking about Farrah, Michael Jackson just died. And then spent the next year of my life on the road. Michael Jackson's funeral, the trial of Dr. Conrad Murray, trips to Neverland, his burial at Forest Lawn, the trial downtown, the memorial at Staples Center. Like Michael Jackson occupied a year of my life, but it was a career changer for the better. Heath Ledger, same thing. I was in Bermuda to run a marathon in Bermuda when Heath Ledger died, and they said, get to New York. And it was January. And I was like, I only have shorts and a t-shirt. They said, that's not our problem. Get to New York. I'm like, it's freezing. I bought winter clothes at JFK Airport and spent a week of my life outside Heath Ledger's Soho apartment building where he'd passed away. So there's one story in the Hollywood years, and I will leave it. I'm going to create this as a blind item to tell you, but there is a certain A-list, much loved, occasionally controversial pop star who I had a sit-down interview with for a half an hour. And she appeared in what I thought was a miniskirt until she sat down and the miniskirt went up to reveal that she was wearing nothing other than a t-shirt. It was not a miniskirt, it was a t-shirt. And she was completely naked and asked where the camera was cutting her. And I was like, we're a morning show. I guarantee you the camera is cutting you at the waist. But had I don't know, had the situation somehow been reversed, where this had been a male celebrity
My
with
God.
a female journalist. I mean, talk about, and this was only 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, talk about sexual harassment or something like that. But these are the kind of bizarre stories that happen.
Oh my God. Are the names of these people in the book?
Some are, and some are changed. So that's part of the fun, when you get to sort of discover who's who. And I will say Jennifer Aniston, not Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Lopez. Jennifer Lopez, she inadvertently flashed me just because she didn't, she had a little wardrobe malfunction, but she was a lady about it. But at least she was wearing underwear. Oh,
Well,
and Jennifer Aniston, we should give a shout out to Jennifer Aniston. Jennifer Aniston, I've known since she was 15 years old. I think I was 17, she was 15, something like that. Her dad, John Aniston, and I were on the same soap opera back in the early 1980s here in New York City. And she had auditioned to be on that soap opera as a teenage runaway character. And Jane Krakowski got the part, not Jennifer Aniston, even though her dad was on the show. And you figure, oh, nepotism, she'll surely get it. No,
yeah.
Jane Krakowski got the part. Wouldn't it have been fun if I don't know, if Jane Krakowski had had Jennifer Aniston's career and Jennifer Aniston had had Jane Krakowski's career? It would have been very interesting. But when I started interviewing Jennifer, and I'm sure you've interviewed her as well, but she has a lot of people around her. She has a lot of handlers, but it was about relationships. And the minute I said to Jennifer, I worked with your dad, and I told her a couple stories about my experiences with her dad back in the 80s, she loved her father so much. And she was telling me about how she'd auditioned for the show. But that cemented it. That's what I'm talking about relationships. Then I was trusted. Then there were never any hoops to jump through when it came to interviewing Jennifer Aniston.
Tell everyone where they can get your books.
The easiest way is to just jump onto Amazon, and the first two are out. The third one's coming next year. Dancing Between the Raindrops and Dancing Between the Raindrops: The Hollywood Years. We're actually going to do a box set, and I just recorded the audiobook for the first one. And very exciting, my return to Hollywood will be coming in April.
I will link below here all the links to your books on Amazon and also Nelson's handles on social media. And thank you for being on my channel. I'm sure people have some questions for you. So if you do, leave it in the comment section below, and I'll make sure that Nelson sees it. And have a lovely day in New York.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you back in New York too. Thanks for the opportunity to chat today. You look
All right,
amazing.
bye.